You really ticketed him? Aria Lane stood in the narrow hallway outside traffic, shoulder against a bulletin board, phone wedged between her ear and her jaw. The line crackled. Sergeant Mercer's voice came low and tight in a way she didn't like. It was a speeding violation, not a war crime, she said. Before we go deeper into this mess between a cop and a mafia boss, if stories like this keep you company at night, hit like and don't forget to subscribe. Silence. Aria, he murmured. Tell me you're joking. She glanced at the fresh printout in her hand. Plate, license, fine. I wrote the ticket, she replied. Why? Because if it's the man I think it is, Mercer said, you didn't just pull over a biker. You pulled over a Calderone. Before the weight of it could settle, her mind yanked her back 20 minutes. To heat and asphalt, and a sound like thunder on an empty road. The highway ran straight through the hills under late afternoon sun. No cars, just Aria's cruiser on the shoulder, engine off, radar gun warm in her hand. The radar chirped. 60, 78, 85. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. A black motorcycle cut through the heat, low and fast. The sound hit her chest. Aria dropped the radar, slid into the driver's seat, and flipped on her lights. Red and blue stuttered across the pavement as she pulled out. She tapped the siren once. A command. The biker eased off the throttle with calm and glided to the shoulder like this was an appointment. He stopped. One boot touched down, steady. Aria set the cruiser in park and stepped out, adjusting the weight of her belt, until he took off the helmet. Hands to the strap. Lift. Routine. But the second the helmet came away, something in her body stalled. Dark hair pushed back from his temples. Strong jaw brushed with stubble. And his eyes, green, already on her. He didn't look away. Didn't flick to her gun or badge. He just watched. For half a heartbeat, Aria's steps faltered. Get it together, Lane. She locked her jaw, smoothed her face, and stopped beside his front wheel. The badge on her chest caught a slice of light and threw it at him. License and registration, she said. He smiled. Not big. Just the corner of his mouth tilting. You're sure your radar's not broken, officer? The way he said officer slid under her skin. Are you suggesting I don't know how to use my own equipment? She replied. He tilted his head. Not at all. Just hoping you might give me the benefit of the doubt. No, she said. 85 and a 60. License. He reached into his jacket. Black leather, worn at the seams. His movements were unhurried. Their fingers brushed when he handed her the card. Warm, solid, a quick, unwelcome spark curled low in her stomach. She ignored it and looked down at the name. Lucian Raphael Calderone. Calderone. The syllables stirred old briefings and roll call warnings. Organized crime charts. A surname inked more than once. There are a lot of Italian names in California. She told herself. It's just a ticket. Mr. Calderone, she said, pen already moving. Do you have any reason for driving like the posted limit doesn't apply to you? Maybe I wanted someone to chase me, he answered. Her hand hesitated for a fraction of a second. That tone, not apologetic, not cocky, teasing, edged with danger. Aria looked up. He was still watching her. Not her uniform, her. You think this is funny? She asked. I think, he said softly, you're very serious when you're angry. Heat crawled up the back of her neck. Her pulse ticked faster, but her face stayed flat. You just earned yourself a citation, Mr. Calderone. She tore the paper free and held it out. Sign at the bottom. It's not an admission of guilt, just acknowledgement. He took the ticket, glanced at it, then back at her. What's your name, officer? He asked. Procedure said she didn't have to tell him. Pride said she shouldn't. Something else answered. Lane. He repeated it quietly. Lane, like he was fitting it somewhere. Nice name. He folded the ticket once and slid it into his jacket. You're very brave, he added. Out here alone, pulling people over. That's the job, she said. Plenty of people do the job, he replied. Not many look a man in the eye when they tell him no. She stepped back, breaking the invisible line between them. Drive safe, Mr. Calderon. A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. I'll try. The engine growled back to life. He slid the helmet on, face vanishing behind dark visor, and in a blink he was motion again, merging into the lane. Aria watched the black shape shrink against the horizon longer than was necessary. What a hot man, she thought, disgusted with herself as soon as the words formed, hot and arrogant as hell. She turned away, walked back to her cruiser, and told herself it was over. Just another biker. Just another ticket. In the hallway outside traffic, the printout in her hand said otherwise. Mercer's voice came back through the line, rougher now. Aria, you wrote up Lucian Calderon? She stared at the name on the page. Yes, she said. The silence that followed was louder than the highway had ever been. Then listen to me, Mercer said. You need to watch your back now. Mercer didn't swear often. When he did, it sounded like gravel. Aria, he said, calmer now but still sharp. Do you ever read the briefings I send or just use them as coasters? She stood at the edge of the traffic room, watching the printer spit out citations. I read them, she said. I just don't base my stops on last names. That's the kind of thinking that gets your picture framed in the lobby, Mercer replied. Calderon isn't just a last name. It's a wall chart. She dropped the ticket copy into the outbox. He was speeding, she said. I clocked him. I wrote him. That's the job. You pulled over a man our task force has been circling for 3 years, Mercer said. Alone, no backup, on a quiet highway. Did he give you any trouble? Green eyes. That unbothered gaze. The word brave landing like a diagnosis. No, she said. He signed. He left. Mercer made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Most troopers would have pretended the radar glitched, he muttered. I'm not most. I know, he said, and some of the bite left his voice. That's why I'm warning you. We've had federal eyes on the Calderonis for years. Nothing sticks. So what do you want? She asked. Void the ticket? I want you to keep your head down, Mercer said. Stay on main routes, no heroics on back roads. If anything feels wrong, you call it in first. That clear? Clear. Good, go home. Get some sleep. And if you see that bike again, you don't play Lone Ranger. He hung up without goodbye. The phone felt heavier when she set it down. On the desk, the ticket copy lay face up. Plate number, statute. Fine. Lucian Raphael Calderon, ink and paper. On the highway, it had been heat and heartbeat, and a stare that didn't flinch. She slid the form into the stack, grabbed her bag, and walked out. Her apartment sat on the second floor of a 3-story walk-up 8 blocks from the station. Inside, everything was where she'd left it. Shoes by the door, keys in the bowl, mail on the counter, one framed photo on the shelf, her father in dress blues, tie crooked, grin wide. Aria dropped her bag and unhooked her duty belt. The weight left her hips with a dull relief. Gun, taser, baton, spray. All set in a neat line on the table. Her gaze drifted to the photo. Detective Michael. Lane looked like he might step out of the frame and ask why she was home so early. You'd have written him too, she murmured, meaning the biker, then lectured him about stopping distance. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She flipped it over with her thumb. You shouldn't have written that ticket. No greeting. No context training told her what to do. Document, preserve. Don't engage. But annoyance flared first. She typed, "Who is this?" stared at the words, then erased them. Instead, she took a screenshot, opened her work email, and sent it to herself with the subject, "Unknown text after traffic stop, paper trail." No drama. The phone buzzed again. He doesn't like being told no. A prickle slid up her spine. She glanced toward the window. Blinds shut, street noise faint through the glass. Nothing obviously wrong. This is stupid, she muttered. She ran the number through the basic lookup she had access to. Disposable. No subscriber data. Someone who knew how to hide. Fear tried to rise. She pushed it down with a long breath. If you wanted to scare me, she said into the kitchen, you're going to have to try harder. Her stomach growled. She checked the time. Almost 8, Lou's diner wasn't far. Neon sign, cracked booths, coffee that could strip paint. She grabbed a hoodie, pulled it over her patrol shirt, and slid her badge into her pocket instead of clipping it to her belt. In the hallway, she locked the door twice and headed down the stairs. The street outside was ordinary. A couple arguing quietly, a kid on a scooter, no black motorcycle. No dark SUV. Stop looking for him, she told herself. For trouble. For green eyes behind a visor. Lou's bell chimed when she pushed the door open. Warm light washed over cracked vinyl seats. The smell of fries and strong coffee wrapped around her. Look who finally remembered to eat, Nina called from behind the counter. Her dark hair was twisted up, apron already stained. I was about to call in a welfare check. Misuse of resources, Aria said, sliding into her usual booth by the window. You could lose your free coffee privileges. Worth it. Nina grabbed a mug. Usual? Grilled chicken, no bun, coffee, strong. On it, Lane. Aria let herself sink back. The low hum of conversation and some old rock track from the radio didn't need anything from her. Out there, men like Lucian Calderon moved in shadows. In here, the biggest decision was pie or no pie. She set her phone on the table, screen down. A few minutes later, she turned it over. No new messages. Relief and something like disappointment tangled in her chest. Nina arrived with the mug and set it down. You look like you argued with a semi, she said. Long day, Aria replied. Drink. You'll live. You ever do something at work and only later wonder if it was unwise? Aria asked. Every time I say yes to the night shift, Nina said. You sure you're okay? Mercer's in a mood, Aria lied. He'll live. Nina studied her a second, then nodded and moved away. Alone again, Aria took a sip of coffee. Her phone buzzed against the table. She stared at it for a beat before turning it. One more message. See you soon, Officer Lane. This time, the shiver that went through her wasn't just fear. It was something she refused to name. The bell over Lou's door chimed again. Aria didn't look up. She was staring at the last message on her screen. Thumb hovering over the delete button like that would erase the way the words felt. See you soon. Officer Lane. She locked the phone and set it face down. Footsteps crossed the tile. Slow. Certain. The air shifted before she glanced toward the door. Lucian Calderon stood just inside the entrance. No helmet in sight. Leather gone, replaced by a dark shirt rolled at the forearms, jeans, worn boots. Nina's greeting died when she saw him. Conversations dipped and pretended they hadn't. They didn't know his name. They didn't have to. His gaze found Aria's booth like he'd known exactly where she'd be. Of course he did, she thought. He walked over. No hurry, no question. You really need to work on your definition of soon, Aria said before he could speak. His mouth curved. Officer Lane. He said it like he was tasting the words. You can't be here, she replied. That's objectively untrue. His eyes swept the room. Doors open, menus laminated. You know what I mean? I often do, he said. May I sit? No, he sat. Nina appeared with a fresh pot of coffee. For your friend? She asked. He's not my... Yes, Lucian said smoothly. Thank you. He looked up at Nina. Espresso if you have it. We do, Nina said. I'll make it strong. I appreciate that. She walked away. Aria waited until Nina was gone. Do you track everyone you get a ticket from? She asked. Or am I special? He folded his hands on the table. Do you write everyone that fast, or am I special? Under the law, she said. You were just another speeder. Under the law, he echoed. But not under you. She hated the way that sounded. You texted me, she said. From an unlisted number. No, he answered. I didn't. You expect me to believe that? If I wanted to talk to you, Aria, I wouldn't use a burner, he said. I would walk into your diner and sit at your table. How do you know where I eat? She asked. You're a cop, he said. You work late. You don't cook. This place is close to the station, and the waitress knows your order. She paused. You followed me. Followed implies distance, he said. I prefer... Kept an eye on. That's worse. For you? He asked. Or for me? The coffee steamed. Aria wrapped her hands around the mug. You think you're the only one who noticed you on that highway? He asked quietly. You pulled me over in the open. That's bold. That's also visible. She thought of the unknown number. He doesn't like being told no. Is this some kind of game? She asked. Because I don't play with men whose names come with wall charts. I don't play, he said. I rearrange pieces. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you feel informed. Nina dropped off his espresso and left. You pulled me over, he said. You wrote the ticket. You didn't flinch. I respect that. I wasn't trying to impress you. That's why it worked. You're used to people bending, she said. People who see your name and suddenly don't remember how speed limits work. Yes, I'm not those people. I noticed. He said it like a fact. She took a breath. What do you want, Calderon? Lucian, he corrected. Or Rafe. I don't, she said. His eyes warmed. What I want is simple. I want to make sure you understand something. If this is where you threaten me, she said, skip the poetry and get to the point. I'm not the one you should be afraid of, he said. Aria laughed once. You expect me to buy that from you? I expect you to observe, he replied. You wrote a ticket most officers would have swallowed. You're not dead. Your window is intact. Your car's fine. High bar. Under my name. Who sent those messages then? She asked. His gaze went distant. Someone who thinks you made a mistake, he said. Someone who doesn't like the idea of you looking me in the eye. Should I be flattered or terrified? Both, preferably cautious. You're seriously sitting in a cop diner warning me about other criminals, she said. You think cops and criminals don't eat in the same rooms? He asked. We share more spaces than you'd like to think. She hated that he was probably right. You could walk away, he went on. Pretend today never happened. Be more careful about who you stop on lonely stretches. That sounded a lot like advice. Call it curiosity, he said. I want to see what you do. The words tightened something low in her chest. You don't know me, she said. I know you didn't run my plate, he said. You trusted your badge. I know you sit with your back to the wall, not the window. Even here. His gaze flicked to her hands. And I know, he added quietly, that when you first saw my face, you forgot to breathe and then pretended you didn't. Heat surged up her neck. You're imagining things, am I? He didn't sound smug. Just sure. She leaned forward. You know what I see? She said. A man who thinks everyone is a piece on his board. Who walks into a room full of cops and acts like he owns the air. You don't like that? He asked. No. Liar. Her pulse jumped. He set the tiny cup down. Here's the last thing I'll say, Officer Lane. He murmured. You did your job, no fear. No special treatment. That's rare. Don't turn my job into a compliment. I'm turning it into a warning. His eyes were steady on hers now. Someone watched you stop me, he said. Someone who isn't me. They sent you those messages. They want you rattled. They want you to think I'm the problem so you don't look for them. A chill slid through her. And you? She asked. What do you want me to think? I want you to think very carefully, he said, before you decide whether you wish today never happened. He slid out of the booth and left cash on the table. The bell chimed as the door shut behind him. Nina appeared at her elbow. He yours? She whispered. No, Aria said too quickly. Nina's eyebrows rose. He looked at you like you were. When Nina walked away, Aria stared at the empty space across from her, heart beating too fast for a woman who claimed she wasn't afraid. She picked up her phone with fingers that didn't feel entirely steady. The last text still waited on the screen. See you soon, Officer Lane. Now she wasn't sure if it was a threat, a promise, or both. The hallway lights in her building flickered when Aria came home. Second floor. 8 steps per flight, She counted them without thinking, keys between her fingers. The ghost of Lucian Calderon's gaze still in the back of her mind. I'm not the one you should be afraid of. She reached her door and paused, scanning the corridor. Empty. Just the hum of an old vending machine at the far end and the muted drone of someone's TV behind a closed door. Normal. She turned the deadbolt, stepped inside and locked it behind. Her gun on the table, badge, phone, her. Apartment smelled like coffee grounds and old books. Quiet, contained. The one place nobody else's rules applied. She toed off her boots, dropped onto the couch, and let her head fall back. Lucian's voice replayed anyway. You didn't flinch. I respect that. Respect from a man like him wasn't comforting. It was dangerous. Her phone buzzed. She froze, then exhaled and picked it up. No new number. Just a message from Mercer. You home? She typed back. Yeah, why? 3 dots pulsed, then, just checking. Don't ignore the briefings from now on. She nearly smiled despite the knot in her gut. I never do. Lane. Yeah? Seriously, watch yourself. She stared at the screen a second longer, then set the phone face down on the coffee table and pushed herself upright. Shower. Sleep. Tomorrow would be the same. Traffic. Tickets. People who thought limits were suggestions. She stripped out of her hoodie and patrol shirt, left them draped over a chair, and stepped into the small bathroom. Steam filled the room. Hot water pounded over tight shoulders, washed away the smell of diner grease and highway dust. Just another day. Just another driver. Just another man whose eyes felt like a problem. When she stepped out, hair damp, t-shirt clinging to clean skin, the apartment felt different, not colder, just aware. The air held a hush that wasn't there before. Aria frowned and listened. Nothing obvious. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint tick of the kitchen clock and a distant siren somewhere outside. Paranoid, she muttered, moving toward the kitchen for water. 3 sharp knocks hit the door. She stopped. Not loud, not neighbor casual. Even, precise. A rhythm that landed like punctuation. Her heart kicked once. She crossed the living room on bare feet, silent on the hardwood, and glanced through the peephole. Empty hallway. No one. She narrowed her eyes, shifted angle. Still nothing. Who is it? She called, voice steady. No answer. Just the hum of the building. The hair rose at the back of her neck. Her gun was on the table, half a room away. She backed up 3 steps, keeping her eyes on the door, and reached blindly for the phone. Her fingers brushed it. The glass behind her exploded. The living room window shattered inward in a storm of glass. A black-clad shape came through the frame, boots crunching on shards, followed by a second silhouette right behind. Aria grabbed the gun on instinct and fired once into the ceiling. Police, she shouted. Don't move! The first man lunged. He hit her hard, shoulder to chest, and drove her back into the wall. The impact knocked air from her lungs. The gun skidded across the floor, disappearing under the edge of the couch. The second man moved for it. She kicked out, foot connecting with his knee. He swore, stumbled, but the first attacker pinned her arms. Let go, she hissed, twisting, driving her elbow into his ribs. He grunted. She caught the edge of a ski mask and yanked. It slipped just enough for her to see part of a jaw, stubble, a scar at the corner of his mouth. You picked the wrong apartment, she snapped. He raised his hand, maybe to hit her, maybe to clamp it over her mouth. The front door burst inward, 1 gunshot, clean, deafening. The man holding her jerked. His grip vanished. He hit the floor beside her in a heavy, dead weight. The second intruder spun toward the noise, hand going for a weapon. The figure in the doorway didn't hesitate. Another shot. The second man dropped, screaming as a bullet tore through his shoulder and spun him into the overturned coffee table. Silence crashed down over the room, glass settling. Aria's breath loud in her ears. Smoke curled from the barrel of the handgun still aimed past her. Lucian Calderon stood framed in the ruined doorway, dark coat open, expression carved from stone. He scanned the room in one sweep. Broken window. 2 bodies, her pressed against the wall, then moved. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Aria pushed herself upright, fingers shaking as she braced on the wall. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded. "Saving you," he said. "I didn't ask you to. You didn't have time." He stepped around the first body, kicked the man's gun away without looking, and checked the second with a hard, efficient glance. The wounded intruder groaned, clutching his shoulder. Lucian crouched, grabbed the front of his shirt, and lifted him enough to whisper something in a language Aria didn't understand. Whatever he heard back made his jaw tighten. He let the man drop. Aria forced her breathing to slow. "Who are they?" she asked. "Not mine," he replied. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," he said. "It's supposed to tell you this is bigger than a traffic ticket." She looked at her smashed window, the glittering carpet of glass, the black fabric of the masks. Fear prickled under her skin now. "Harder to deny. My neighbors, I called no one," he said. "Because we weren't that loud and they mind their business." "You broke my door," she snapped. "They broke your window," he countered. "We're not even." She glared at him. He holstered his gun in one smooth motion and stepped closer. "You got the messages," he said. Not a question, she swallowed. "You didn't send them?" "No," he repeated. "When I want your attention, I do it in person." "Stop saying things like that," she muttered. "Why?" he asked. "Because I'm trying to decide if this is your fault or mine." "It's theirs," he said, nodding toward the floor. "But if you need someone to blame, use me. I'm used to it." She folded her arms to hide the tremor in her hands. "You've been watching me," she said. "Yes." He didn't bother to dress it up. "Stalking a police officer is a crime," she said. "Is it stalking?" he asked. "If the person you're watching is being marked by someone else." Her stomach flipped. "Marked?" He nodded toward the shattered window. "This is a message," he said. "To me. Through you. I don't belong to you," she snapped. His eyes softened a fraction. "I know." "Then why are they using me?" "Because you pulled me over," he said. "Because you didn't flinch. Because you put your name on a piece of paper with mine and sent it through a system that has too many eyes." She remembered Mercer's voice. "Wall chart. Federal eyes. Task force," she murmured. "Rivals," he corrected. "Men who don't like that you saw me and live to write about it." She stared at him. "This isn't making me feel better." "I'm not trying to make you feel better, Aria," he said quietly. "I'm trying to make you understand." "Understand what?" "That you can't stay here tonight." Adrenaline gave way to an exhausted, furious laugh. "Oh, great," she said. "So you break into my life, drag bad guys through my window, and your solution is kidnapping?" "You call this a life?" he asked, eyes flicking over the tiny apartment. "An unlocked window and a deadbolt anyone can kick through?" "Door was locked," she said. He looked pointedly at the splintered wood. "Was..." A siren wailed faintly somewhere beyond the building. "Not for her." "Not yet." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We can argue about jurisdiction later," he said. "Right now, there are 2 men on your floor who came to scare you, and you fought them in a t-shirt with your gun out of reach." "I handled it," she shot back. "You were about to be unconscious when I walked in," he said, voice still even. "Call that handling it if you need to. I call it almost dead." The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. She looked at his face then. Really looked. There was a thin line of blood along his cheek where glass had nicked him coming through the door. He hadn't even wiped it away. "You got hurt," she said. He gave a small shrug. "Occupational hazard." Guilt tried to creep in. She shoved it aside. "If these men aren't yours," she said, "if they're someone else's, why are you the one standing in my doorway?" "Because whoever sent them did it to get my attention," he replied. "I'm giving it, and me?" she asked. "What am I in this exactly?" He met her gaze for a long beat. "Collateral," he said. "If you stay here." The honesty stung. "Where do you expect me to go?" she asked. "A hotel? Back to the station? You think they can't find me anywhere else?" "No," he said. "I expect you to come with me," she laughed. "Absolutely not. Aria, I'm not letting a Calderon drag me off to some compound so you can protect me from problems you brought to my door, she said. His eyes flashed, not with anger exactly, but something close to frustration. You think your badge protects you from men who climb through windows? He asked. You think filing a report will stop the next knock? It's what I have, she said. You have me, he replied. The room seemed to shrink around that sentence. She shook her head, trying to breathe past the way it landed. I don't trust you, she said. Good, he answered. That might keep you alive. Trust my assessment instead. He moved toward the window, looked out into the night, scanning roofs and streetlights with a practiced eye. I'll have these bodies gone in 10 minutes, he said. No police, no questions. Tomorrow, there'll be no trace they were ever here. That's what I can do. Or, she said, I can call this in like an officer and let homicide deal with it. And their bosses will quietly ask you, he said without turning, why men tied to someone you pulled over were at your home less than 24 hours later. She hated how easily he stepped through the logic she'd been avoiding. You're involved now whether you like it or not, he said. The difference is whether you're involved alive. He turned back to her. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. The words weren't loud, but they were absolute. Aria looked from his face to the broken window, the bodies, the shards of her old normal life glittering at her feet. Every instinct screamed at her to tell him no. To stay, to call Mercer, to cling to procedure like a shield. Instead, she heard her own voice say, barely above a whisper, where would we even go? His shoulders eased a fraction. Somewhere no one knocks unless I invite them, he said. That's supposed to make me feel safe? No, he murmured. But it will make you harder to reach. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She wasn't ready to agree. Not yet. But when she looked at the door he'd kicked in and the window someone else had shattered, one thing was horribly, undeniably clear. Staying was no longer an option. The SUV smelled faintly of leather and rain-damp fabric. Aria sat in the passenger seat, jacket zipped over her t-shirt now, hands braced on her knees. The city slid by in streaks of yellow and red. In the back seat, one of Lucian's men, broad-shouldered, silent, watched the mirrors more than the road ahead. Last chance to change your mind, Lucian said from the driver's seat. She almost laughed. What mind? You didn't exactly give me options. I gave you 2, he replied. Stay in a broken apartment they can find again, or come somewhere they can't. That's not a choice, she said. That's an ultimatum with seatbelts. The faintest smile touched his mouth. You buckled anyway. She hated the way her body answered every small line from him, like her nerves hadn't gotten the memo that he was a problem. Streetlights thinned. Buildings dropped away into darker stretches. The SUV turned off the main road onto a narrower lane lined with trees that swallowed the sound. Where are we? She asked. Out of your jurisdiction, he said. Safely inside mine. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be accurate. A tall gate loomed ahead, iron and stone. The guard booth beside it glowed faintly. A man stepped out, glanced into the car, and stepped back twice without a word. The gate rolled open. Of course it did. They followed a winding drive bordered by tall hedges until a house grew out of the dark. Not ostentatious, not gaudy. Just big. Solid. Old stone and warm windows. He parked near the front steps and killed the engine. The silence after the hum of the road felt louder than the sirens she'd grown up on. The rear door opened first. The man from the back, mid-30s, sharp eyes, close-cut hair, got out and scanned the yard before he nodded once. Lucian glanced at Aria. Marco, he's with me. Lucky him, Aria muttered. Unbuckling, outside the air was cooler. The house loomed less like a threat and more like a decision someone had made a long time ago. This was his world. This driveway. These guards. The weight of unseen guns pointed outward, not inward. She adjusted her shoulders, as if she could put her uniform back on with posture alone. You going to arrest the landscaping while you're at it? Lucian asked quietly as she stared up at the house. Depends, she said. Did the hedges threaten a cop tonight? Not yet. He led the way up the steps. Marco fell in behind them, a silent shadow. Inside, the foyer was wide and warm. Wood floors, soft light, walls that held old paintings and newer cameras if you knew where to look. Aria's boots felt too loud on the polished boards. "So this is where you keep the bodies," she said. "Basement," Marco muttered. Deadpan. She shot him a look. He didn't smile. Lucian ignored them both. "Guest rooms are upstairs," he said, gesturing toward a broad staircase. "You can sleep, shower, lock the door. No one goes in without my permission." "So they all need your permission to breathe?" she asked. "That's how security works," he said. "Centralized trust. Fewer variables. In my world, we call that control." "In my world," he replied, "control is the difference between you waking up tomorrow or not." The words landed heavier than she wanted to show. She frowned at the staircase. "I should call this in." "And say what?" he asked. "Dear Sergeant, 2 masked men broke into my apartment because I wrote a ticket for a Mafia Boss, who then rescued me and took me to his illegal fortress." "Safe house," Marco said. Lucian's lips twitched. "He prefers safe house." Aria lifted her chin. "I'm still a cop." "That hasn't changed," Lucian said. "The question is what you do with that information now." She turned on him. "What I do is stay on the side of the law." "Has the law been on your side?" he asked, her jaw clenched. "Don't psychoanalyze me, Calderon." "Lucian," he corrected. "Or Rafe, if you must." "I must not." Marco shifted, gaze flicking between them like he was watching a tennis match played with live grenades. "Boss," he said quietly. "We should lock this down. If they were willing to hit a cop's apartment, they're not scared enough yet." "Exactly my concern," Lucian replied. He looked back at Aria. "Go upstairs," he said. "First door on the right. There are clothes, a bathroom. Rest." "Don't order me," she said. "I don't have time to negotiate," he answered. "You're tired and you're shaking." "I'm not." He moved closer, not quite touching her. "You're shaking," he repeated softly. Only then did she look down and see the faint tremor in her hands, adrenaline. Shock. Come down. After nearly losing control in her own living room, she curled her fingers into her palms until it stopped. "See?" she said. "Handled." "You did well," he said. "You're stubborn." "That's useful. It also gets people killed if they don't know when to sit down." "Funny," she said. "That's almost exactly what my training officer used to say about ego." "Did he live?" Lucian asked. Her throat tightened. "No," his gaze softened. "Then maybe he knew something." She hated that too. A long beat stretched between them. "Fine," she said. "One night I sleep. Then I go back. I talk to Mercer, and I file a report." He shook his head. "Tomorrow you'll talk to me first." "You don't own my choices. Not yet." Her eyes flashed. "Is that a promise or a threat?" "An observation," he said. "Go upstairs, Aria." It was the way he said her first name that finally made her move. She rolled her shoulders, walked up the stairs like she was walking into an interrogation room instead of a guest suite, and didn't look back. Only when she turned the corner did she let herself exhale. The room was simple. Wide bed, neutral sheets, a dresser, a door to a small bathroom, a folded stack of clothes on the chair that weren't hers, but would fit. He had thought this through before tonight. That realization landed like a stone in her gut. Closed the door and leaned against it. Safe. The word felt wrong here, but safer than her smashed apartment. Safer than unknown shadows climbing through her windows. She changed into the soft t-shirt and loose pants left for her, then paced once, twice, before her eyes snagged on the small object resting on the nightstand. A flash drive. Black, unmarked. A card lay beside it, a single line in neat handwriting. "For when you're ready to know what your badge never told you." Her heart tripped. She picked up the drive, turning it between her fingers. Her father's face flickered across her memory. The funeral, the folded flag, the quiet, unfinished questions nobody answered. "Of course you know," she whispered to the empty room. "Of course you do." Downstairs, she could hear muffled voices. Lucian giving orders. Marco answering. Doors closing, locks sliding into place. The house tightening around them like a fist. She set the drive back down slowly. Whether she wanted it or not, this place and this man now held something the law had never given her. A way to the truth. And that, more than the broken window or the bodies on her floor, terrified her. She turned off the lamp and lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. Sleep didn't come, but one thought circled like a patrol car around a dark block. If he was dangerous with a gun, he was worse with information, and she had just walked straight into both. Morning came in slices of light across the guest room ceiling. For a few seconds, Aria didn't know where she was. No traffic hum, no neighbor's TV through thin walls, just quiet, padded by money and stone. Last night came back in fragments, broken glass. 2 men in masks, Lucian in her doorway with a gun. Safe house. She pushed herself upright. The t-shirt she wore smelled faintly like his cologne. Clean, expensive, unwelcome. On the nightstand, the flash drive waited where she'd left it. Small, harmless looking. For when you're ready to know what your badge never told you. She picked it up, feeling its weight against her palm. Fine, she muttered. Show me. The hallway outside her room was empty. Sunlight cut across the floor in bright bars. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door closed. Voices murmured and faded. She followed them to an open doorway. Lucian's office was all dark wood and clean lines. Shelves of books. A single painting. A massive desk facing the trees. He sat behind it, jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes on a laptop. The screen light carved his face into sharper angles. He looked up as soon as she appeared. You should still be asleep, he said. Too much gunfire in my evening, she replied, holding up the drive. And you left evidence in my room. I left answers, he said. He stood, came around the desk. Have you watched it? No. Thought you might want a front row seat. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect or regret. Sit, he said quietly. She hesitated, then took the chair. This doesn't mean I trust you. I'd worry if you did, he said. He plugged in the drive and stepped aside, letting her see the screen. A folder appeared. Case files. Internal. Dates from more than a decade ago. Her pulse picked up. She double-clicked. Grainy footage filled the screen. A parking lot at night. 2 men under a flickering light. She knew one of them before his face turned fully toward the camera. Detective Michael Lane. Younger. Less gray at the temples. Same stubborn jaw, her father. The other man wore a cheap suit and permanent irritation. They were arguing. Her father gestured with a folder tucked under his arm, then toward the camera, then back to the man. No audio. She could still hear it. The set of his shoulders. The way he half turned like he already sensed a hit coming. The timestamp at the bottom glowed steady. 2 days before his death. Her throat went tight. What is this? She asked, eyes locked on the screen. Internal affairs surveillance, Lucian said. His voice had dropped. Your father agreed to work with them. The video stayed. The audio did not. How do you have it? My family collects things the Bureau loses, he said. Or hides, she clicked to the next item. A scanned report, blacked out in thick blocks. A few lines survived the ink. Off-record investigation. Organized crime tasking outside standard protocol. Contact with rival syndicate asset. One name cut through the middle. Unredacted. Adrian Vescano. Her thumb froze on the trackpad. She zoomed in, needing to be wrong and knowing she wasn't. Vescano, she read. He's yours. Rival, Lucian corrected. The one your people confuse with me on purpose when it suits them. She looked up sharply. You're telling me my father was investigating Vescano for internal affairs? I'm telling you he found proof some of the bodies on your wall chart belong to Vescano, not to me, Lucian said. And he tried to move the aim. On the paused video, her father turned away, outline blurred by the cheap camera. She opened another document. Her eyes skimmed. Officer Lane requested off-site meeting to deliver physical evidence. Concerns re corruption within existing task force. Subject believes Calderon family not primary actor in current violence pattern. She stopped reading. You're saying, she began slowly, my father was trying to clear your name. In one case, Lucian said, he was trying to keep the gun pointed at the right man. And he died for it. That's my belief, Lucien replied. You're free to pick another. The room tilted. She remembered the official words like labels slapped over a wound. Line of duty accident. Wrong place, wrong time. Drunk driver. Wet roads. Words that mean stop asking. What happened that night? She asked. Lucian's jaw flexed once. He was driving to meet someone with more evidence on Vescano, he said. He never arrived. The crash. The impact wasn't random, Lucian said. The other driver had no prior record. No pattern. Paid to drink, paid more to drive, paid most to keep quiet. And you know this because? One of my men watched him afterward, Lucian said, until he disappeared. She turned in the chair to face him. You knew, she said. All this time. You knew my father didn't just get unlucky, and you didn't tell anyone. I told someone, he said. Your father. He knew he'd hit something real. That's not what I mean, she snapped. You didn't tell the department. Mercer. Me. You were a teenager, he said. Then a rookie. Then a cop who still thought the system would fix itself if you saluted hard enough. Anger flared clean and hot. You don't get to define what I think. I do, he answered calmly. If believing it gets you killed the same way. She stood. The chair scraped against the floor. You don't get to hold my father's death like a card and throw it when it suits you, she said. You drag me out of a home invasion, hand me a drive, and suddenly I'm supposed to accept your version over the badge I wear? He took a step toward her, then stopped himself, hands loose at his sides. I think, he said slowly, that if I'd told you sooner, you'd have gone after Vescano alone, the way he expects good cops to do. I'm not stupid, she said. No, he replied. You're brave. That's more useful to him. The words landed harder than she wanted them to. On the screen, her father's face had frozen mid-turn, eyes reflecting the camera glare. You let me wear his badge, she whispered, without telling me the story behind it. You think your bosses didn't see the same lines? Lucien asked. They chose accident because murder and conspiracy come with paperwork and headlines. So you decided to protect me, she said, the word sour. I promised him, Lucian said quietly. He pulled one of my men out of a situation he didn't deserve saving from. He asked one thing in return, keep his daughter clear of the crossfire that killed him. Her anger faltered, hitting grief like a wall. You knew who I was, she said, on that highway. Not when you first walked up to my bike, he said. Only when I saw your name on the ticket copy later. She remembered the way he'd repeated Lane, the weight of it. And then you just watched me? She asked. I made sure no one else watched too closely, he said. Until yesterday. Until I pulled you over. A corner of his mouth lifted without humor. You have a talent for stepping into traffic. Silence thickened. She looked back at her father on the screen. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing, he said. I already owe you more than I can pay. That's not an answer. I want you alive, he said. And I want Vescano to know he failed twice. That's enough. Her heart pounded. You should have told me, she said again, softer. Years ago, maybe, he replied. Or maybe today is the first day you'd believe me, she swallowed. And if I don't? She asked. If I take this drive to Mercer and tell him Lucian Calderon is suddenly very helpful about my father's death? He didn't flinch. Then I become the problem they write up, he said. And you get buried again under half-truths. You're very sure of yourself. No, he said. I'm very sure of men like Vescano, and what they do to people in their way. He stepped closer, slow enough she could move. She didn't. You wanted the truth, he said quietly. Now you have it. Don't let it kill you, too. Her fingers tightened on the back of the chair. Why do you care this much? She whispered. Why risk yourself, your men, for me? A muscle jumped in his jaw. Because I owe a dead man, he said. And because since the day you stopped me on that road, I haven't gone an hour without thinking about you. The confession hit like a second impact in the same wound. Her breath caught. He gave a small, tired smile. You wanted honesty, he said. That's what it looks like from me. Her heart understood the danger faster than her head did. That, more than the files or the footage, scared her most. The house breathed different at night. During the day, it felt like a fortress. Thick walls, locked doors, men with guns posted where most people kept potted plants. After dark, everything quieted. The cameras still watched. The guards still walked. But the noise in Aria's head got louder. She'd left the office without another word after his confession. Because since the day you stopped me on that road, I haven't gone an hour without thinking about you. The line had followed her down the hallway, into the guest room, into the shower, into the way her hands shook when she tried to button a clean shirt. She lasted an hour behind her own door, maybe less. Now she stood on the upstairs landing, bare feet sinking into a runner so soft it felt wrong under someone who'd learned to live on concrete. Down below, warm light spilled from the west wing. Voices drifted up, low, tense, male. Business. She'd learned to recognize the sound of men talking about violence without using the words. Then a door closed. One set of footsteps retreated. Another didn't. She took the stairs anyway. The west hall smelled faintly of smoke and rain-damp air from an open window. She followed it to the end, where a set of glass doors led out to a stone terrace. Lucian stood with his back to her, leaning on the railing, shirt sleeves rolled, head bowed slightly, like the night weighed more than the day ever did. His phone was at his ear. Italian flowed out of him in a low, controlled stream. She didn't know the words, but she knew tone. Sharp, cold, final. He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket without turning around. You're not sleeping, he said. Neither. Are you? She answered. He glanced over his shoulder. When he saw her, some of the tension in his shoulders shifted. Not gone, just rearranged. Did the files help? He asked. They lit a match in a room I thought was empty, she said. So, yes and no. He turned fully, resting his weight on the railing. Moonlight and house light carved lines across his face. The dried cut on his cheek looked angrier now, not cleaned properly. You should get that looked at, she said, nodding at it. He lifted a hand, brushed his fingertips over the nick, and gave a small shrug. I've had worse. That doesn't mean you ignore it. That your professional opinion? He asked. That's the cop talking, she said. The woman thinks you're being stupid. The woman or you? He asked softly. She swallowed. Same thing. For a moment, neither moved. Wind rustled in the trees beyond the terrace. Somewhere on the grounds, a dog barked twice and stopped. You keep telling me you don't trust me, he said, but you came out here. I came out here because you put my father's ghost on a screen and handed me the gun that killed my old story, she replied. I can't exactly go back to bed and count sheep. Somewhere under the sharpness, her voice cracked. He heard it. His eyes softened. Sit, he said, nodding toward one of the chairs. She shook her head. If I sit, I'll stay. If I stay, I'll forget I'm supposed to be angry. What if you're allowed to be both? He asked. Angry in here? That sounds messy. It is, he said. Most real things are. She laughed once without humor. You think this is real? She asked. Whatever this is? He studied her face like it was a puzzle he'd been trained to solve. You're not a woman I can buy, he said. Or scare, or flatter into staying. You're here anyway. That feels real enough to me. She hated that the words hit something soft she'd spent years armoring over. I don't know what to do with you, she admitted quietly, with any of this. Welcome to my week, he said. She shot him a look. This is a joke to you? No, he answered. If it were a joke, I wouldn't have men outside with rifles and your name on a list that says no one touches her. His voice had gone low and hard by the end. She looked at him. Really looked. at the lines at the corners of his eyes that didn't come from laughter, at the way his fingers tapped once against the railing as if counting danger instead of seconds. "I spent my whole life trying to be the kind of cop my father would be proud of," she said. "Strong, uncompromising, untouchable." "You succeeded," he said. She shook her head. "If I had, I wouldn't be here." "You're here because someone else killed him and decided you were an easy message," he said. "That's not failure. That's math. You make everything sound simple," she said. "Power math bullets. Like people are just variables." "Everyone but you," he said. The words hung between them. "I can't afford to think about you the way I think about anyone else," he went on. "I can't put you in a column or a box or a contingency plan. Every time I try, you walk into the middle of the road in front of whatever's coming." "Maybe that's just who I am," she said. "The idiot who steps into traffic. The woman who steps between danger and strangers," he corrected. "You pulled me over because I broke a rule that keeps people alive. You didn't care who I was. And now I know," she said. "Now I know you're the man my briefings told me to stay away from. And yet," he said, "here you are, barefoot at night on my balcony." She felt suddenly aware of every detail. Her bare feet, the thin cotton of the shirt against her skin, the way the wind lifted damp strands of hair at her neck. "You make it sound intimate," she said. "It is," he replied. Her heart stumbled. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Everything about this is wrong." "Morally?" he asked. "Professionally?" "All of it." He stepped closer, careful, like she was something that might bolt. "Then why are you still here, Aria?" he asked. "Why aren't you inside, calling your sergeant, telling him everything so he can come take you away from the bad man?" "Because I don't know if he can keep me as safe as you can," she said. The words ripped out of her before she could dress them up. And I hate that. There it was. The fracture line she'd refused to trace. His eyes darkened, not with triumph, but with something like relief and regret welded together. "You think I like knowing that?" he asked quietly. "That a woman like you, that you, has to pick between a badge that lied to you and a man who kills for a living?" "I don't want to pick at all," she whispered. "I want my father back. I want my old apartment and my boring roots and my convictions about right and wrong. I want to write a ticket and not start a war." Her voice broke on the last word. She covered her mouth with her hand like she could shove everything back down. The years of being unshakable, the funeral, the folded flag, the nights she'd driven the same stretch of road he died on just to prove she wasn't afraid. Lucian moved then. Not like a man closing in on a prize. Like someone stepping into a collapse. He stopped an arm's length away. "Aria," he said. She shook her head without looking at him. Don't what?" he asked softer. "Don't say my name like you know me," she said. "Don't look at me like that. Don't—" He reached out and caught her wrist before she could turn away. Not hard. Not owning, just enough to stop the spin. "Look at me," he said. She did. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't the eyes from her briefings, the ones they put on walls with arrows and red string. They were tired, angry, and terrifyingly open. "You're allowed to be tired," he said. "You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to want something for yourself that isn't duty and grief." "That something cannot be you," she said. "Maybe not," he agreed. "But it is." He took a breath like the next admission cost him. "I haven't gone an hour without thinking about you," he said again, quieter now, like a confession to the dark instead of a weapon. "Not because you pulled me over. Because you looked at me like a man and still told me no. Because you didn't bow. Because you walked into my world and didn't flinch." Her wrist tingled under his fingers. "That shouldn't matter," she said. "It does," he replied. To me, silence swelled. Her heart hammered loud enough she was sure he could feel it through the narrow bones of her arm. "Tell me you don't feel this," he murmured. "Tell me to send you home and I will." She opened her mouth. The lie caught in her throat. He saw the struggle. His thumb brushed once, absently, over the inside of her wrist. A tiny, thoughtless motion that felt more intimate than a dozen deliberate gestures. "Lucian," she said, barely a breath. He closed his eyes for a second like the sound hurt in a way he welcomed. "Say it again," he whispered. She didn't. Instead, she stepped closer, just enough that the heat from his body reached her skin. Just enough that she could feel the tremor he'd controlled everywhere else. "This is insane," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Tell me to walk. Away." "No." She let out a shaky laugh that wasn't really laughter at all. "I don't know if I want to." "Arrest you or—" He leaned in. The space between them shrank to inches. "Or what?" he asked, her hand flexed in his grip. "Kiss you," she whispered. The word hung there, fragile and heavy. His jaw tightened. For a second she thought he'd step back, that he'd be the one to choose the right thing. Instead, he lifted his free hand to her face, fingers brushing a damp strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was careful, reverent, like he was asking in a language that didn't use words. "If I start," he said, voice rough, "I'm not sure I can go back to pretending this is nothing." "I'm not sure I can go back to pretending either," she answered. The last defenses broke somewhere she couldn't see. He closed the distance. His mouth met hers, not with practiced charm, but with a rawness that made her knees threaten to give. Heat surged up her spine. Her free hand fisted in the front of his shirt, pulling him closer as if she could fall through him and out of everything that hurt. He kissed her like a man who'd been starving on purpose, controlled at first, then deeper when she didn't pull away. The railing pressed into her back. His hand slid from her cheek to the nape of her neck, anchoring her in place like he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. For a few searing seconds, there was no badge, no blood, no files, just the impossible fact that the one person she shouldn't touch felt like the first honest thing in years. When they finally broke for air, foreheads touching, both breathing hard, the night felt changed. "Aria," he said again, a rough prayer. She closed her eyes. "This doesn't fix anything," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "It just tells the truth." Her heart, traitor that it was, felt lighter and heavier at once. For the first time since her father's funeral, she let herself lean, just a little, into someone else's strength. And that, more than the kiss, was the real betrayal. Morning did not feel like forgiveness. It crept in soft and gold across the stone floors, slipping under doors and through old glass, touching everything like the night hadn't held gunshots and confessions and a kiss that broke more than one rule. Aria woke on top of the guest bed covers. Fully dressed, heart already beating too fast. For a second, she thought she'd dreamed the terrace, the railing at her back, his mouth on hers, the way her fingers had refused to let go of his shirt. Then she caught the faint smell of his cologne on her skin and knew. No dream. No taking it back. She sat up, scrubbed her hands over her face, and stared at the flash drive still on the nightstand. Her father looked back at her from memory, not from the grainy footage, laughing at some joke she no longer remembered, arm around her in that sideways cop hug that meant everything. "You'd hate this," she whispered. "You'd hate that I'm here, with him." But he'd also hated Viscano, hated dirty cops, hated the way truth got buried when it made the wrong people uncomfortable. "The system lied to you," Lucian had said. "I'm just the one who dragged the lie into the light." She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood. The mirror over the dresser showed a woman with sleep-tangled hair, dark circles under her eyes, and a line in her mouth she didn't recognize. Not just tired, decided. She pulled on the same borrowed t-shirt and sweats, then cracked the door and stepped into the hallway. The house was quieter than the night before. No raised voices, no distant footsteps rushing past. Just the clink of dishes from somewhere, and the low, almost comforting murmur of a TV in another wing. She followed the smell of coffee. The kitchen wasn't what she expected. Not the gleaming, unused showpiece most rich men kept for staff. It looked lived in. Mugs on the rack, a pan on the stove, a bowl with 3 apples and a bruise on one. Lucian stood at the counter, back to her, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. No jacket, just a black t-shirt, jeans, bare feet on tile. A bandage now covered the cut on his cheek. Clean white against tanned skin, she paused in the doorway, unsure how to walk into a room with a man she'd kissed and half sworn to oppose. He didn't turn, but she knew he'd registered her. "Good morning, Officer Lane," he said. "You have impeccable timing. You always talk like you started the scene before I got here?" She asked. "Only when I did," he said. He slid one mug across the counter without looking. "Sugar's next to you. Milk in the fridge." She moved closer. The floor was cool under her feet. "You fixed your face," she said, nodding at the bandage. "A doctor came," he replied. "Stitches. Lecture. I ignored half of it. Typical. You sound like him?" Lucian said. "Who?" "Your father," he answered. "He used to tell my man Leon the same thing. You're not invincible. You're just lucky and stupid." She tried to imagine Michael Lane in a room with Lucian Calderon, lecturing his men, and something in her chest twisted. "So we keep circling back to him," she said. "Even over coffee." "He's the reason you're here," Lucian said. "And the reason I care if you leave alive." She wrapped her hands around the mug. It was warm enough to ground her. "I thought last night," she began, then stopped. "I don't know what I thought, honestly. I just couldn't breathe with everything inside my own head." "And now?" he asked. "Now I can breathe," she said. "But I can't pretend any of this is temporary." A quiet settled between them. Not the sharp silence of fear. Something slower, heavier. He leaned against the counter, mug in hand, studying her. "You regret it," he said finally. She met his eyes. "If I say yes, you'll believe me?" "No," he said. "But I'll let you." She almost smiled in spite of herself. "I don't regret it," she admitted. "I regret that it felt like the first honest thing in a long time." That seemed to hit him harder than anything she'd thrown last night. "Aria," he said, her name a warning and a prayer in one. "I'm still a cop," she cut in. "I still have a badge. I still have rules. I'm not going to be your secret. Your pet officer you keep in a spare room and pull out when it suits you." His jaw worked. "That's not what this is. Not for me." "Then what is it?" she demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, I'm a liability to you, and you're a conflict of interest to me." He set his mug down a little too hard. Ceramic clicked against stone. "It's inconvenient," he said. "It's dangerous. It makes me slower, and slowness gets people killed. It makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability gets people used as leverage." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that the space between them felt like an answer waiting to be spoken. "And still," he said quietly, "if I could go back to that road and choose not to see you, I wouldn't." Her breath stuttered once, then steadied. "That's the problem," she said. "I know." He stepped back before the air between them caught fire again. "Marco pulled over night footage," he said, business sliding over intimacy like armor. "The men who hit your apartment belong to Viscano. Not directly, through a shell we've seen before." "Then he knows I'm connected to you now," she said. "He knows you touched my life," Lucian said. "He'll want to use that." "Good," she said. Both his brows lifted. "Good," she nodded. "You wanted me alive. You wanted him off your board. I want my father's ghost put to rest. We use his attention." "You're asking to be bait," he said. "I'm saying stop treating me like glass," she replied. "You drag me into your war. You don't get to set me on a shelf and tell me to stay put." His eyes went colder. Not at her, at the idea. "You have no idea what men like him do to bait," he said. "I've seen what men like him do to officers who get in their way," she said. "He already tried once. You stopped it. Now we decide what happens next, instead of waiting for him to pick the time and place." He studied her for a long, silent stretch. "You realize," he said slowly, "that this is exactly the kind of stubbornness that got your father killed." Heat flared under her skin. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the thing he passed down that makes sure I finish what he started." "He started an investigation," Lucian said. "You're suggesting a trap." "Comes with fewer paperwork forms," she said. He almost laughed. Almost. "You're not funny," he muttered. "A little," she said. He shook his head once, as if he couldn't quite believe he was having this argument in his own kitchen, with a woman wearing his clothes and drinking his coffee like they'd always done this. "You're not bait," he said finally. "Non-negotiable." "I'm already bait," she countered. "They came through my window because of you. Pretending otherwise doesn't make me safer." She set her mug down and moved around the counter, closer to him, closer to the stack of papers he'd left there. One loose sheet near the edge caught her eye. A photocopy of a citation, her own handwriting, statute number, date. He went still when he saw what she'd noticed. "You kept it," she said. "The ticket?" he asked. "The ticket," she repeated. She picked it up. The paper was creased from being folded and unfolded more than once. "Souvenir?" "Evidence," he said. "Of what?" she asked. "That there's at least one person left in this city who doesn't flinch when she should," he answered, her chest tightened. "You could have thrown it away," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "And you didn't, no." She set the paper down gently, as if it were something more fragile than an ordinary traffic violation. "Core. Exhibit in the case of bad decisions versus gravitational pull," she said. He huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh. "If you stay," he said, "it doesn't get easier. Viscano escalates. The feds sniff around. Your sergeant asks questions you can't answer honestly without dragging me into his office in handcuffs." "If I leave," she said, "none of that stops. I just won't see it coming." They stood facing each other, the ticket between them like a line they'd both already crossed. "You're not a prisoner here," he said quietly. "If you walk out that door, I won't stop you." She believed him. That was new, and more dangerous than any threat. "I'm not staying because you won't let me go," she said. "I'm staying because my father died chasing a man who thinks he can do anything and walk away." "And you think standing next to me helps?" Lucian asked. She thought of the flash drive, of Mercer's half-answers, of the way the system had labeled her father's murder an accident and moved on. "I think," she said slowly, "that if I'm going to walk into fire again, I'd rather do it with someone who doesn't pretend it's rain." He stared at her. Something in his expression, something she hadn't seen even when he'd kissed her, finally cracked. Awe, maybe, or fear of a kind he didn't know how to aim at anyone but himself. "Then we do it my way," he said, carefully. "On ground I choose. With exits, you know." "You don't get to make all the rules," she said. "You get to make one," he replied. "You tell me when it's too much." "I listen." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "You're really bad at sounding like a villain when you say things like that," she said. "Don't tell anyone," he replied. "I have a reputation." Outside, a car passed somewhere beyond the gates, its engine a low hum that faded quickly. Inside, for the first time since she'd stepped into his world, Aria felt something close to balance, not safety. That was a fairy tale, but a fragile kind of peace built on shared danger and inconvenient truths. She picked up the ticket again, folded it once, and handed it back to him. "Hold on to that," she said. "Why?" he asked. "So when this all blows up in our faces," she said. "You remember it started with me doing my job and you not slowing. Down." His fingers brushed hers as he took it. Warm, steady. This moment might have lasted longer if not for the sharp buzz of a phone on the counter. Marcos. Name flashed on the screen. Lucian's face changed. He answered. "Yes?" A pause. His eyes went colder. "When?" he asked. Another beat. Understood. He ended the call, jaw tight. "What?" Aria asked. "A car sat outside your precinct this morning for 20 minutes, he said. "Same plates we've seen near your apartment this week," Viscano, watching her. Brief peace thinned. "So much for balance," she murmured. Lucian slipped the folded ticket into his wallet like something he planned. "To keep for a very long time. Looks like we're on the clock. Now," he said, and just like that, the quiet morning wasn't an ending. It was the last inhale before the next hit. There are nights she still wakes up to the sound of breaking glass. Not the window in her old apartment, not exactly. More like an echo of every shatter that came after. The warehouse skylights, the bottles on the floor, the way her own certainty fractured when she watched Adrian Viscano fall and realized the world wouldn't suddenly turn simple because the worst man in the room stopped. Breathing. The sea helps. It's louder than memory. Waves. Slam the rocks below the cliff house, pull back, slam again. A heartbeat you can hear from every room. It smells like salt and rusted anchors, and something that has seen 1,000 storms and doesn't bother naming any of them. Aria stands on the balcony wrapped in a sweatshirt that isn't hers, mug warm in her hands. The sky is a soft, cloudy gray, the kind that makes the horizon blur into the water. Behind her, through the open door, she can hear the quiet murmur of a TV and the faint clink of a spoon against a cup. Lucian's somewhere inside, talking low into a phone or reading a file that will never touch a court record. For once, he's not the loudest thing in her head. She thinks about the file on her father again. She always ends up there. How easy it had been for the system to call a hit an accident. How hard it had been for her to accept that the man who finally tore the truth into daylight had no badge at all. Justice, she's learned, is not the same as the law. The law is what wrote accident on her father's report. The law is what told her to stay away from the Calderon name even when the evidence said look closer. The law is dress blues and folded flags and speeches about sacrifice delivered by people who never stayed up night after night, wondering why the pieces didn't fit. Justice is messier. Justice is Lucian, bleeding, dragging her out of a warehouse that reeks of cordite and dust, whispering through gritted teeth that she has to live even if he doesn't. Justice is anonymous files left on federal servers, coordinates sent from nowhere, warehouses full of Viscano's records raided, because someone who shouldn't have had them decided to give them away. Justice is knowing the man who killed her father died afraid for the first time in his life, and knowing she pulled the trigger that made him flinch. She closes her eyes, leans her forearms on the railing. Her badge sits in a drawer inside, wrapped in its own velvet box. She hasn't turned it in. She hasn't strapped it back on either. Leave of absence. That was the phrase Mercer used. His voice had been rough over the line the night everything ended and began again. "You're not okay, Lane," he'd said. "I'm functioning," she'd answered. That's not the same thing. He hadn't asked where she was. He hadn't asked who stitched her shoulder up when the bullet grazed her in the chaos. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he already did. "You did good," he'd said instead, "even if no one writes your name in the report." She's begun to understand that, too. Some stories are safer without your name attached. Inside, a floorboard creaks. Talking to the ocean. Lucian's voice drifts out, roughened by sleep and too many late calls. "Arguing with it?" she says. "It's not listening." Sounds familiar. She glances back. He leans in the doorway, hair mussed, t-shirt wrinkled. A man who terrifies half the city looking for once, like he belongs in the soft edges of morning. It hits her sometimes, like now, in quiet flashes. The man she shot beside in the warehouse is the same one she kissed on a terrace, the same one her father once trusted with a favor, the same one every briefing board painted as a monster. All of that is true, and none of it cancels the other pieces out. "Do you ever miss who you were before?" she asks, turning back to the sea. He steps closer, joining her at the railing. "Before what?" he asks. "Before Viscano? Before the first time I put a gun in my hand? Before you?" "Any of it," she says. "All of it," he thinks for a moment. "No," he says. "I miss who I could have been if I'd had different choices. But that man doesn't exist. This one does." Says the king of moral clarity. She mutters. "You?" he asks. "Do you miss who you were before you pulled me over?" "I miss the illusion," she says. "I miss thinking the badge and the right intentions were enough. That there were good guys and bad guys, and my job was to write tickets and keep the lines clean. And now," he presses, "now I know the lines are fingerprints," she says quietly. "Messy. Overlapping. Used to hide as much as they reveal." She pauses, searching for words that don't sound like someone else's speech. "I used to think strength meant never bending," she admits. "Never letting anyone close enough to see where it hurts. I built my whole identity on being the unshakable one, the daughter who didn't cry, the officer who didn't need backup." "And?" he asks. "And it turns out," she says, "that sometimes strength is letting someone stand between you and a bullet. Or letting yourself want something you can't name in a report. He's silent beside her. You realize, he says eventually, that your father knew that. He took help. He made deals. He asked the wrong man for a favor to protect the right one. The wrong man, she echoes. That's what they call me, he says. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am the wrong man. He glances at her. But I did what I promised him. She thinks of the flash drive. Of the look on Lucian's face when he'd said I promised him I'd keep you clear of the crossfire that killed him. Her throat tightens. You kept me alive, she says. You didn't keep me clear. No, he agrees. You walked into the crossfire yourself. I just moved with you. Terrible plan, she says softly. The worst, he answers. They stand like that for a while, watching the waves break and reform. Do you ever wonder what he'd think? She asks. If he could see this, us. I think he'd hate it, Lucian says honestly. On principle. Then he'd watch you talk, and he'd see you're not foolish. You're just done letting other people decide your story. And he'd decide whether he hated me enough to ignore that. She huffs out a breath that's half laugh, half sob. You're very sure of yourself, she says. I'm very sure of you, he corrects. Words settle into a space inside her that used to be all armor and no warmth. If you're watching this, she thinks, not sure if she means her father or the invisible audience beyond the fourth wall. If you're listening, you should know something. Love didn't make her weak. It didn't erase her self-respect, or her grief, or the part of her that still itches when she sees a cruiser on the highway and wants to follow. Love just forced her to admit she was human, that she could stand on the edge of danger with her eyes open, choose a man whose hands were stained and whose code was different from hers, and still be the kind of woman her father raised. Stubborn, loyal, unwilling to look away from the truth even when it hurt. Would you do it again? Lucian asks quietly, like he's reading the direction of her thoughts. Pull me over on that road? She doesn't hesitate. Yes, she says. I'd write the ticket. I'd tell you to slow down. I'd be furious. I'd think what a hot man and what a problem. His mouth curves. And after everything that came with it? He asks. The lies, the files, the bullets. She looks at him. At the life they're standing in the middle of now. At least now I know what I'm choosing, she says. Before I was just living inside everybody else's version of my story. She turns fully, leaning back on the railing, facing him. If there's a lesson in any of this, she adds, it's not that love fixes criminals or that power suddenly becomes pure because it protects you. It's simpler. He lifts a brow. Enlighten me. Power without mercy is just fear, she says. And love without respect is just control. The only way any of this works, she gestures between them, is if you remember you're capable of both. And you? He asks. What do you remember? That I'm allowed to be soft, she says, without handing you my spine. He searches her face, something like pride flickering there. Do you think they'd understand? She asks, gaze drifting out past him, past the balcony to whoever might be listening, the ones watching from the outside. Would they forgive you for not fitting clean into villain or hero? Does it matter? He asks. She lets the question hang, then turns it outward, toward the invisible listener. What would you choose? She murmurs. Safety that lies to you or danger that tells you the truth? The waves don't answer. But for the first time in a long time, she doesn't feel like she's asking for permission. She's just telling the story the way it really happened. The sun burned low over the highway again. Different coast. Different car, same stretch of hot asphalt, cutting through dry hills and lazy wind. Aria watched it roll by from the passenger seat this time. Bare feet on the dash, hair tied up, his jacket pooled in her lap. The SUV hummed under them, the engine a steady, controlled growl instead of the reckless roar of that first black bike. Your speed, she said, squinting at the digital display, is exactly 2 miles under the limit. Lucian glanced at her, mouth tilting. You sound disappointed. I am, she replied. I was promised a repeat offense. You were promised nothing, he said. I learned my lesson, she snorted. Doubt it. He let the car coast a little faster anyway. The needle crept up one tick. "You realize," she added, "if a patrol car sees us and pulls you over, I'm absolutely letting them write the ticket." "Of course you are," he said. "You wouldn't be you otherwise." Wind slipped through the cracked window. It smelled like warm grass and the faint tang of the sea if you breathed deep enough. They'd left the Cliff House that morning before sunrise. No convoy, no extra cars. Just the two of them, a bag in the back with essentials. The rest of their lives sitting in places that weren't safe, but weren't being hunted anymore. Vescano was gone. The name still tasted like gunpowder when she thought it. But it no longer came with the old helplessness. The feds had raided his leftover warehouses. Anonymous intel, account numbers, schedules, enough to dismantle his operation and smear what was left across indictments and sealed filings. None of the reports had mentioned a cop once used as bait. None of them had mentioned Lucian Calderon at all. That was by design. He drove with one hand loose on the wheel, the other resting between them, palm up on the console. Her fingers found his without looking. They didn't talk for a while. The road unwound in front of them, familiar and new all at once. A cruiser sat tucked under an overpass up ahead. Aria saw it before Lucian did. Old instincts tightened her chest. She checked the speed again. 65 in a 60. For a ridiculous second, she pictured herself doing it again, flipping on lights that weren't there, stepping out of a car she no longer had the right to drive, walking up to his window and saying license and registration just to see if his eyes would look the same as they had that first day. Instead, the cruiser stayed put. Just another cop on just another shift, watching just another pair of headlights go by. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Miss it?" Lucian asked quietly. "Sometimes," she said. "Not the paperwork, or the politics, or the way they read my father's eulogy and then never said his name again. But the simple parts, the parts where doing the right thing was writing a ticket and going home." "You still do the right thing," he said. She raised a brow. "According to who? A man with 3 safe houses and a private dock?" "According to me," he replied. "That's not reassuring," she said. "Your moral scale is crooked." "It's calibrated differently," he corrected. "Not broken." She rolled her eyes. "Keep telling yourself that." He brought their joined hands to his mouth, brushed his lips over her knuckles. "What about you?" she asked. "Do you miss who you were before some stubborn traffic cop decided your speed was unacceptable?" "Less every day," he said. "You liked being untouchable," she reminded him. "I liked thinking I was," he said. "Then you showed up on a highway with a radar gun and a face that said no even when your pulse said yes." Heat slid up her neck. "You're never letting that go, are you?" She muttered. "No," he said. "You looked at me and thought, what a hot man, what a headache." "That's not what I thought," she lied. He laughed once, low. "You told me later." "Under duress," she said. "Under honesty," he countered. She shifted in her seat, pretending to adjust the vent so she didn't have to look directly at him for a second. He let her have the pretense. "Pull over," she said suddenly. He blinked. "Here? Next turnout. Are you about to arrest me?" he asked. "Not yet." He eased the SUV onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. The hills stretched out around them, golden and dry, the late afternoon light painting everything in a familiar haze. It was almost disturbingly close to memory. He put the car in park and cut the engine. "What are we doing?" he asked. She unbuckled her seatbelt and shifted to face him. "Fixing something," she said. He watched her cautiously amused expression. "Step out of the vehicle, Calderon," she said. His brow arched. "You sure this isn't a fantasy you should be paying someone to analyze?" "Out," she said, fighting a smile. He obeyed, pushing his door open and stepping into the heat. She followed, closing her door with a soft thunk. For a quiet second, they just stood there on the shoulder. No sirens, no backup, no cameras, just a man and a woman facing each other on a road where everything once changed. She took a step forward, posture straight, like muscle memory from 100 traffic stops. "Sir," she said. "Formal, do you know why I asked you to pull over today?" He played along, hands loose at his sides. "Speeding?" he offered. "You were fine," she said. "I pulled you over because I wanted a better ending this time." He studied her face like it was the only thing on the horizon. "Last time," she went on, "I let you drive away and told myself you were just another problem I'd never see again. Then I went home, and the world rearranged itself without asking my permission." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know better," she said. "You're still a problem. I'm still a cop in my bones. But I'm not going to pretend you didn't change everything." The wind tugged at her hair. A truck roared by in the opposite lane, a brief rush of noise that faded as quickly as it came. "Lucian," she said, and the way his eyes responded to his own name told her she'd never stop seeing that. "Yes," he answered. "I stopped you for speeding," she said. "You stopped me from living a life that wasn't really mine. You dragged the truth out of a grave I'd been told to leave alone. You made me furious. You made me feel alive. You scared me more than any man with a gun ever did." His throat worked once. "Aria," she shook her head. "Let me finish before I lose my nerve." He nodded, silent. "I chose you," she said simply. "Not because you're easy, not because you're safe, but because you protect like you mean it, and you don't lie to me about who you are. Because you looked at me like a person, not leverage. Because you kept your promise to my father when you could have walked away." Her voice softened. "Because God help me, I love you. And because I can stand here on the side of a road that tried to kill everything I believed in, and say that without feeling like I'm betraying myself." The confession hung there, fragile and solid all at once. For a long heartbeat, he didn't move. Then he closed the space between them in 3 strides. His hands framed her face, thumbs careful at her jaw like she was something both breakable and unbreakable. "You think I don't know what that costs you?" he asked, voice rough. "I think you're about to prove you do," she said. He kissed her. No shock this time. No stolen moment on a balcony. Just a deep, steady press of mouth to mouth that felt like an answer instead of a question. When they broke apart, she stayed close, forehead resting against his. "So what now?" she asked quietly. "We drive into the sunset and pretend we're normal?" "We drive," he said. "We argue, we plan. We make enemies nervous and get you a better view of the ocean. We spend the rest of my life paying off that ticket." She laughed, the sound spilling out lighter than it had in years. "You still owe me for that," she reminded him. "I know," he said. "I intend to keep owing you." They walked back to the car together. He opened her door first this time, a small old-fashioned gesture that somehow didn't feel like control. It felt like acknowledgement. When they were back on the road, the highway stretching endlessly ahead, she glanced at the rearview mirror. The past was back there, the uniform, the apartment, the lies on her father's report. Not erased, just behind. "Hey," she said softly, knowing somewhere, somehow, someone was listening to this story unfold. "If you've made it this far with us, you should know something." She imagined them, whoever they were, sitting in their own quiet rooms, on late-night buses, in beds lit by blue phone light, hearts beating a little faster at the idea that danger and safety could share the same seat. "Love like this isn't neat," she said. "It's not clean. It doesn't make you perfect. It just makes you honest. With yourself. With the person you choose. With the risks you're willing to take." She smiled faintly, watching the lines on the road slide under them. "And if you want to hear more stories like ours," she added, a little embarrassed and a little sincere, "don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to tap that button. It tells me you were here with us all the way to the end, and it helps me bring you more messy, emotional, dangerous, true-feeling love stories like this one. She reached over, laced her fingers with his again. She had stopped him for speeding. He had stopped her heart forever. The highway rolled on. The sun dropped lower. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between them felt like peace.